Hey there, welcome to another edition of Road Noise with Hutch. This is the leaving Las Vegas version, heading on I-15 south, getting out of the Silver State and headed back to Southern California. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about silver and gold today. Physical metals are part of the 40 banking edition. And I noticed that, people are either full bore, like doomsday prepper gold bugs, or they just completely dismiss it, perhaps because Warren Buffett said it was a dumb investment. Doesn't pay dividends. Perhaps maybe you're a crypto or a Bitcoiner, and they say it's just stupid. But because Bitcoin is the new uh, technological version of a store of value, but for eons, like centuries, literally, gold and silver have actually been a store of value. I don't know if you realize this, but if you Google like price of gold, rich man suit, um, the price of gold has allegedly always been right around the price of a rich man's suit. And obviously it moves, but it never gets too far. And in fact, one article I read said that when gold and silver both popped in 2011, when it peaked, before we just recently made all-time highs, but it had peaked before, and they said it had gotten out of whack from that price of a rich man's suit. And lo and behold, it reverted to the mean. It came back. But some people are saying it was definitely the case in the 1800s, 1900s. Here we are again, still the case, still keeping purchasing power. But some people say it goes all the way back to ancient Roman times. Um, why it's so important is like obviously a lot of the problems that we're having economically have to do with all the money printing. And I explain it to my kids about inflation. It's a concept that's, tricky, especially when you're young, that things just cost more. They don't stay static forever. Um, but it's a simple supply and demand thing. When you turn the printing presses on and there's a lot more paper, there's a lot more fiat currency out in the world, and it needs to find a home. It needs to find a way to invest. And things that fall on your foot are going to cost more money, whether that be gold, whether it be gas, whether it be timber, whether it be, even the price of equities, which are really just businesses. Everything is going to cost a little bit more because of the money printing and the inflationary pressures that it causes. So it's really a defensive move. And some people would think, well, hey, this metal, whether it's gold or silver, it's not really liquid, right? It's a single use asset. And I agree to a point. What I would say is, first of all, there are different operations where you can borrow against it. And so I would treat it like the ultimate emergency fund. So if you think of your emergency fund being in cash in 2021, 22, just due to the rampant inflation, do you think you didn't lose money? Like if you put $100,000 in an emergency fund, you still have $100,000. But because the $100,000 doesn't buy as much, it's really cumulatively like you lost somewhere between 15 and maybe 25%, possibly. It really depends on what you buy. Inflation. They cook the books, the CPI numbers, consumer price index. They cook those books all the time. Like, well, the price of furniture didn't go up, or microchips, or whatever. And even though we have a need to buy that once in a while, the things that we're buying on a daily basis, eggs, milk, gas, food, bottled water, it's crazy. Um, all of these things cost a lot more money. And so cash, keeping cash in an emergency fund, certainly in 2021, 22, when interest rates were very low, was silly. People are kind of lulled into complacency right now because you can still get high yield savings account at 5. But the problem is you don't earn that 5. You don't earn all of it. There's a silent partner in that deal. So if you only pay 30% between state and federal taxes, your 5 turns to 3.5. If you're paying 40, right, your 5 turns to 3. If you're paying 50% state and federal tax, your 5 turns to 2.5. So this is the issue. This is the problem. One of the problems with high yield savings, but the other one, the silent tax, is when the government inflates away our purchasing power, and for uh, its own ends, for lack of a better word. Um, anyway, I digress. I want to bring it back to how to make gold and silver actionable. You know, if you have a 40 banking model, meaning you have a lot of different pools of liquidity that you can tap into, um, even if certain things are down, right? You have a HELOC, you have taxable stocks in a brokerage account. You don't want to go too aggressive on that because it's carried by margin, but you can be slightly more aggressive if you have money in a policy that you can borrow against to make the margin interest whole. Uh, if money in your 401k, again, people are trying to knock the cover off the ball in their 401k, but maybe they shouldn't. Maybe that's an ideal place for a big component of an emergency fund, because a cash emergency fund, because when you earn five in the 401k, well, it equals five. Eventually, someday, when you take the money out, you're going to have to pay tax, but at least you can keep it compounding at the full five, versus when you have 5% in high yield savings, you're not compounding at five. It's five to three and a half. And then you compound that at five. Nope, it's three and a half. And right now they're talking about lowering interest rates. But if you were to put it in short-term bonds or stable value funds or whatever inside a 401k where there's a loan option, you can only borrow 50,000 if you have a $100,000 balance. But why expose all that money to risk where even if you win, the government can change the game on you in terms of taxation and figure out that they want a bigger share of that anyway? Maybe that's the ideal thing to park part of your liquid emergency fund, where if you absolutely need it. And I realize you do have to make principal and interest payments. So fine, borrow 50,000, put 10 in a high yield savings or whatever, and just use that to make your payments, for the first year change, whatever that looks like. Maybe that's not a bad idea. So it's only a $40,000 emergency fund. But the ultimate emergency fund for me is physical gold and silver. There's a lot of, let's just say, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but just mystique around it. Like, I don't even know how to buy it. Where do I go? Where do I keep it? All that stuff. So, you can obviously keep it vaulted in your house. If you're not talking about a really big number, you just find a good hiding place. You put it in the safe, wherever that looks like. Maybe you put a little bit in the safe and then have the rest in a good hiding place in case you get robbed. There's enough to say, hey, here's some, go away. Um, there's local places you can often vault them if you're going to go for a really big number. Safety deposit boxes are not really safe. I've heard multiple stories about people getting ripped off. Um, so let's talk about how to buy it. There's multiple online vendors. And again, people think like, oh my gosh, I'm just sending money to a black hole and they're just going to ship and mail me gold. Yeah, they do. And it seems like it would be expensive because that stuff's heavy, but it's actually free shipping. Um, as long as you're ordering over a certain amount, usually like a couple $100. Now, I will say this, certain states like my state, uh, they don't charge sales tax on gold and silver if you buy a certain amount. It used to be 1,500. Now it's 2,000. So as long as I buy in $2,000 increments, they don't charge me for shipping and handling, nor do I pay state tax. So I'd find out what that is for your specific state. I'm sure you can Google it, put it into Chat GPT, and figure out that answer. But the two sites that I use the most is one is called Bullion Exchanges. I can't remember right now if it's Bullion Exchange or Bullion Exchanges. If you type it in with LLC, it'll show up. They're actually out of New York City, but they have just consistently low prices for even smaller purchase amounts. Oh, we got a bogey. I don't see him, but I hear him with the radar detector. I'm going to slow down a little bit. Um, yeah, you can just start dollar cost averaging. So something that I do is I put the gold and silver futures, and because even though they're correlated, silver is a lot more volatile. And we're going to get into that because I think there's a real opportunity in silver, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. But I just put the charts on my phone and check them. And just like anything, they channel. And when they're down, I just kind of force myself. It's like a disciplined DCA. Let's buy $2,000 worth, even if it comes out of your emergency fund, because even though it seems like it's not liquid, you could actually sell that back to the same places. And even though there's a little bit of a premium over spot price, it's fairly liquid for the most part. It's essentially, it's almost like real estate where you're going to give up, um, you know, a few all the way up to 10% on either side. But like, let's face it, if there's a major emergency, chances are gold and silver are up to where you're making up for that. Like, it's just like, oh my gosh, like all hands on deck, or, you know, our currency just gets so debased that it turns into Venezuela, or it turns into like what happened to Iraqi money, or so many others, the Turkish lira, where it just gets so inflated where you just need like thousands of dollars for a loaf of bread. Well, now all of a sudden you can go ahead and get a lot of liquidity. So the premium doesn't seem, that premium that you pay to get into it doesn't seem like it hurt that bad. Um, but going back to the other places, Monument Metals. So I find these two places have just consistently low prices. Over time, Monument Metals before used to be cheaper or tied, and now it seems like bullion exchanges are actually the cheaper outfit pound for pound. The other thing I want to talk about silver, since I am almost out of the silver state here. You can see it in the background. They discovered silver here, I guess, in the mid 1800s, and there's a little bit of a silver rush. It was after California's gold rush, but that's why they called this the silver state. Um, but there's something called the gold silver ratio, which it's the number of ounces of silver it takes to equal an ounce of gold. Because over time, they both retain their purchasing power. Gold is obviously the gold standard, therefore it's more stable. And even recently, gold has really run up to new record highs, but silver has not gotten back to its record highs. We're not even close. And there's additional industrial demand for silver. In fact, there's a major solar farm up here, right on state line between California and Nevada, and silver is a major conductor in solar panels. And apparently, China is investing heavily in solar, and I'm sure we will too at some point. I mean, we're already seeing these solar farms sprout up. Uh, but regardless, also in electronics, the other thing that I heard recently is Samsung is coming out with a new car battery that doesn't take that long to charge and holds the charge better. Well, lo and behold, each battery contains about a kilo of silver, which is 32.5 ounces. For the record, right now, gold's about 2,500. That's spot price. So you're going to pay a little premium, pay a little lower premium for gold. So somewhere between 3 to 6% over the spot price to buy an ounce of gold. I'll tell you what I recommend, like what types and denominations here shortly. Um, Silver per ounce is like 28 change. And going back to the silver gold ratio, like over time, it's largely been between like 40 and 80, meaning when silver pops, it only takes 40 ounces of silver to equal an ounce of gold. And either way, you retain your purchasing power. But there's a cool chart that shows like if you would have always traded in your silver, sold your silver and bought gold, or traded it. And then every time you can get 80 ounces of silver for an ounce of gold or more, you trade it back to silver. If you would have just channeled that over decades, you increase your supply. Like all of it's keeping up with inflation, the purchasing power, the price of a rich man's suit, but you actually end up with more by channeling this gold silver ratio, which is really interesting. So when I first started, I was stacking, bits of gold. But then when I realized that silver is way undervalued, right now we're between like 80 and 90 ounces of silver for gold. I've been stacking silver. I also do it. The bulk of my precious metals is to tie a bow around everything is in a self-directed 401k, and that has to be vaulted. You can't keep it in your own safe. But I have 6 figures of vaulted silver nearby. Like if the whole world goes to shit, I can go get it, and I'll worry about penalties of premature withdrawal at that time. But actually, as trustee of a 401k, not so much with the self-directed IRA, but if you're a trustee for a self-directed 401k, you actually have 60 days to kind of move it from one place to the next. As long as that's not happening on a regular basis, I think you can do it once within a year. So that is worth noting and looking at for an emergency reserve fund. Again, like you could liquidate it. You could just keep it in silver, 50,000 in silver and gold in one of these vaulted places in a self-directed 401k. And then if you need to take a loan from your own 401k, you're never going to get fired from that job. If you're self-employed, have a self-directed, you could always take that loan. We'll go more into that in the retirement aspect or retirement element of 4D banking. But going back to silver, I'll tell you what I buy. I used to buy straight weight. So I used to buy kilos because they were cheaper, like 32.5 bars. It's like a small brick. It's pretty heavy. You can like wrap your fist around it and yeah, like it could hurt somebody. Because I would get those really cheap, like $1 over spot when spot was in the 20s. So again, I was getting that for 5 to 6% over spot price. The coins cost more, like American Silver ASEs, American Silver Eagles. Those go for generally between $3 to $5, like $3 to sometimes $8 over spot, which is a lot, right? Now, like now we're talking over 10%. 10% over spot price, but they do retain their value. You can sell them back more and they're recognized widely. I think there's a real sweet spot with Canadian Maples. First of all, instead of 0.999 pureness, they're 4.9s, 0.9999. It's a little softer, easier to damage, but they come in protective tubes. But usually you can get those, like if spot is $3 for American Silver Eagles, you can get Canadian Maples for $2 or less under spot, or excuse me, over spot, so that you can get more for your buck. And those are pretty widely recognized. Britannia's, the English version, they're just 0.39s, but a little bit cheaper over spot, but pretty well recognized. I think if you stick to those three, you're fine. And recently I've gotten some silver kangaroos. Those are also 4.9s. Those are Australian. They're 4.9s, 0.999. And I think those get recognized. Again, when you're buying in $2,000 increments, you're going to at least get tubes. The tubes are 20 or 25, depending on the type of coin. And if you can get 500 ounces, that's going to be in the teen thousands. You get a monster box, which is kind of nice, a sealed monster box. Going back to gold, for gold, I definitely like the coins. I have bought 1 ounce bars before, but for the for gold, I like the same thing. I like the American Eagles. They cost the most. There's a sweet spot with Maples. They're 4.9s. Otherwise, the Britannias hold their value, or Cougarans tend to hold their value. Although the Cougarans, the American Eagles, and the Britannias are just they're not quite as strong or as firm. The Cougarans, which are South African, are a little bit less, but they did it for the durability of the coin, and it's just pretty widely accepted that people are going to accept this if you ever need to sell back. Now, again, if you wanted to keep it, there is a place here in Las Vegas where you can drive or fly your stash here or ship it insured. And then you pay them to store it 50 basis points, but then they'll lend against it, 75% loan to value. And I took the stuff that was just the bars, that wasn't the coins, and I put it on loan here. And I took a small loan. I've since paid a lot of it back because I think there's a real opportunity coming. Hopefully not the end of times, but when the correction comes, I just want to be prepared and have maximum liquidity available to make some moves. So that's how I use silver and gold. I think at the very least, you should have it as part of your doomsday prepper kit. But again, if you needed to be liquid, keeping it in an outfit like this, or knowing at least you can send it, worst case scenario, cash it in a pawn shop, or have some in a self-directed 401k, can be beneficial. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I know it's foreign to all of you, but definitely check it out and at least start stacking whatever 1,500, 2,000 at a time, because if everything goes to hell, right? It's like you better have it and not need it kind of thing, than need it and not have it. Like its value could substantially inflate, especially compared to a cash emergency fund. So until next time, road noise with Hutch. And by the way, we just left the Silver State. We're in California, and there's the massive solar farm right over there. You can't see it, but it's there.